Welcome to the Focus on Parliament show here on Civic TV with me, your host for the day, Okot, Olaa. Today we are delving into the discussion around Uganda at 61, which was celebrated on Monday in Kitgum district, which also happens to be my home district for that matter. And it's a great honor to have capable panelists today to break down several issues around our journey of independence. Of course, every constitutional republic has three arms: the judicature, executive, and the legislature. And of course, the legislative duties are enshrined at the highest levels with our parliament. And today we shall be discussing that journey all the way from independence, or even pre-independence, when we had the legislative council. But how has the legislature performed? And also, yesterday, of course, we saw bikery between two MPs, the woman MP of Rakai, Juliet, and the Honorable Francis Zake in Parliament. What do some of these tensions mean for the culture of legislature, the quality of debate, and what is Parliament performing to the level that is expected for the collective good of Ugandans? And of course, to break down those issues, I have my very capable guests, frequent faces as well here, starting with, of course, retired Major Pollar Awich from the National Resistance Movement, where he ably serves as the director. I believe you moved on from legal now. Yeah, but Director External Affairs. You're most welcome.
Thank you. Greetings to our viewers.
Yes, you're most welcome. And of course, on my immediate left is Mr. Timothy Chemonges, who is a seasoned policy analyst. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Olaa, and a good morning to our viewers. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. And of course, before we delve into the issues around discussion of independence, around our Independence Day, we are honored to have a seasoned international expert. I don't know if it was directly in these lines, but we have a conflict going on that we can't afford to ignore, which is the Israel-Palestine war. And of course, largely our concerns are humanitarian from this angle as Ugandans. And I would like to know from you, what is your view or reflections on what is going on in this very polarized region?
The conflict in Palestine could easily push one to which side you think is right or wrong. But I think I'd like to share with viewers the facts about this geographical area, because it is surrounded by myths. Some myths are picked from the Old Testament and the New Testament of the Bible. For example, we all know that the Bible keeps referring to Israel as the Jews as a God-chosen people, and sometimes we go by that. But I'd like to put briefly, if I may, the history in this. The history in this is that many BC ago, the Jews lived in Middle East. And as we know, all people have been moving, including me, Elangi or Anacholi, to have come from Ethiopia through Sudan up to Uganda now. So we all have where we went through. Now, the Jews got scattered during the Roman Empire. Now, when they got scattered around the world, they lived nearly in all parts of the world.
Yes.
And sometimes they got into conflicts with their host people. Some writers say it is because they became rich and started loaning money out. So people started saying, but these people are not citizens. How can they be rich? So they got problems. And their problems climax in the Second World War, when it is alleged that Hitler killed 6 million. So around that time, thinkers started saying they look for a Jew, a home. And one of the homes they looked for was Uganda, Karamoja. If it had worked out, the current Israel would be in Karamoja. So they tried Karamoja because the British Prime Minister then was called Mr. Balfour. So they had what was called Balfour Declaration. Balfour declared that the Jews must be got a home. And because Uganda was a British colony, they said take them to Karamoja and create a country for the Jews. So if it had become successful, Israel would be in Karamoja. I don't know what that would have meant. Now, since Karamoja was not viable according to other factors, they decided to take them to Middle East. Now, in 1948, according to Balfour Declaration, Balfour, I repeat, was the Prime Minister of England, UK. The Americans came to support Jews just recently. The issue is a brainchild of UK. So they created, they took them to Israel. They said, okay, you will be settling here alongside your brothers, the Jews. In any case, they are brothers with Arabs. So they put them there, but they armed them. So they now started. At the beginning, they couldn't fight. They were protected by the British Army. And then as they were armed, they kept expanding. In other words, Israel as it is a bone of 1948, having been collected from around the world. Is a bone of 1948 to the extent that when Uganda was under UNC, was really fighting for independence, Israel is still being born. But some people think Israel is a long time ago, chosen by God. But it's a birth of 1948. And that arbitrary thing caused problems. Some people said, okay, since they were put there and expanded, then let them have another country called Palestine, for the Arabs, another country called Israel. But they have refused a two-state problem. So it has caused problems and problems up to now. For a long time, the Jews have been coming. And by the way, if you want to know the effect of environment, if you went to Israel now, every Jew, because they're coming from all over the world, even if you went to parliament, you'd see a Jew and say, this one is from Sweden. Because it looks like Swedes. You see a Jew from UK and say, this one is a Jew from UK. You even see one from Russia, say, this honorable member is from Russia. Or you even see one from Ethiopia. You'll say, this Jew is from Ethiopia. And that is how environment can have impact on us. So they have come back to Israel. And that is what it is now. So it's a big problem, and it has caused a lot of problem. But now to your problem on humanitarian, I'm just surprised that Security Council is a dead institution now. Why? Because if you wanted to come with a resolution, remember there's the issue of veto powers, the 5 veto powers. If the resolution was in the interest of Americans, Russia would veto. If the resolution was in favor of Russia, America would veto. So the organization is nearly dead. So humanitarian things are gone. Nobody can take an action. To make matters worse, we have the support from the American, where even the media is completely biased. For example, you hear reporting like the Palestinian gunmen, but they don't say the Israelis gunmen. As if the Palestinians have guns and the Israelis have spears. As if one side have spears, another side have guns. So even the whole media system is distorted.
Yesterday we were reflecting on a BBC tweet that 500 Palestinians dead. 500 Palestinians dead, and then 700 Israelis killed.
So you can see that biasness in reporting. So the humanitarian crisis is such a serious thing. In fact, what is there now, it amounts to genocide. And unfortunately, Israel says we shall finish them. Remember the definition of genocide. Genocide is an intentional identification on killing of a gene to wipe them out. So the situation is a test for the world powers, it's a test for humanity, it's a test for our civilization. Humanitarian crisis is terrible, but I thought I would share the history so that we are on the same page.
Thank you very much for that history, including what many people don't know, that Uganda,
Karamoja was it was the first choice.
Yes.
The first, Palestine was the second choice. And they only choose 2 places.
In the whole world.
Yes, Karamoja and Palestine.
Wow. Yes, and Timothy, your reflections, seeing what is happening. Of course, it's absurd. Lots of lives are being lost. We see a lot of vows. People are being called semi-humans. Supplies are being cut. What do you make of this conflict?
I mean, looking at what Major Awich is saying, clearly, and it's something that is likely to recur if we do not find a more sustainable solution. Major Awich highlights the question of the Security Council, which is responsible for the security of the world.
The world, yeah.
And if you have also politics involved in there, and you cannot make any positive move, you have the members who have the ultimate voting decisions divided in lines. You definitely see that there's a bit of confusion in light of finding a more sustainable solution. It's a far-fetched, and I think it's the same thing that's it's really affecting the rest of the parts of the world. And so for me, really, is just to give it a perspective of finding a more amicable solution, given the fact that we are losing lives, we're losing property, but also we seem not to have the precedent being set is very unfair, given the fact that we do not have a one body which should be able to intervene. You have a lot of interest at play, but also lives are getting lost, resources are questioned, but also you look at how the other parts of the world, because we are all potential victims of conflict.
True.
And if we do not have systems, we do not have players or structures which can quickly intervene. We've seen these conflicts in Africa, and you definitely see that the African Union also, they for them to make any very firm action or take any firm action, they also have to seek approval from the Security Council, which holds the ultimate decision making. And so, to that end, if you have a Security Council that is heavily divided, but also it has the question of veto powers, I think there is need for us to reflect and get back to the drawing board. We as Africa, I think we've also been hearing some of our leaders pushing for at least having a country or a system where Africa can be included at the to hold the veto power, or to have a system where we are clearly representative and allows for quick and very firm decisions to be taken in the best interest of the world.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much. And of course, that was just to intro. Some things are hard to ignore, even if there wasn't directly, of course, what was meant to be discussed. And we shall zero down on the topic of discussion today, which is Uganda at 61. But viewing it from the light of Parliament, this being a focus on Parliament show, I would believe the Honorable, when he joins, will give us more insight on the contemporary, which was the bickery we saw yesterday in Parliament. But for purposes of the panelists around, I would like to, of course, start with you, Major. Uganda, we are having our 11th Parliament, starting way back from 1920 when we first had the Legislative Council to 1945 when we had the first 3 Ugandans, I believe from Buganda, Bunyoro, and Busoga at the time. We had the post-independence parliament, the dead years of Idi Amin, and of course, revamping under Bote II, the National Resistance Council, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 11th Parliament. What do you make of the journey of Parliament and its contribution to our independence journey? Of course, we are looking to building a nation, but also coming from the ruling party, your take on Uganda at 61, our progress.
I would prefer to give my overarching comment about Uganda at 61.
Yes.
And
you can start with
and
that.
then the details to Parliament, leave it to him because he works in Parliament.
Okay.
But then I like to say that some people even think we shouldn't have got independence anyway. Some people think that we not have been better off under colonialism. Or haven't we messed up so much that we would have rather left it? Now, this is some feelings that come up, but I like to say, no, it is not good to have been under colonialism, because a right to self-determination is an alienable right and is a right granted to everybody naturally. Now, I want to mention that the situation under colonialism was bad. The situation under colonialism was bad to the extent that you could actually say, instead of taking people slaves outside Africa, they decided to enslave us here. Now, if you did an anthropological study on the feelings then, you could see it is reflected in many songs in our community. In Luo, there's a song which says, under colonialism, you would see up is far, down is very near. There's nowhere to run. The colonialists believed, for example, of forcing people for public work instead of going to work and be paid, like we have projects. Like if there was working in Karuma to build a dam, collect people, beat them, take them to Karuma. Remember, we didn't have lifts and all this. You'd even be forced to carry loads with your head. And they believed that a black man would understand from the buttocks. So all this, if you do an anthropological study, you'll find that the situation under colonialism was bleak. Even the so-called infrastructure were meant for their economic interests. For example, you'd say, they build railways up to Kasese. What was in Kasese? Copper. Oh, they built railway up to Navy. What was there? Cotton. So all this was bad. And of course, the right to self-determination. So I want to say, those who think we could have been under colonialism were wrong. And also, if you think like that if you would have stayed under them, Zimbabwe was the latest to get independence. Where's Zimbabwe? They are nowhere. They just got in when NRM was in power, Zimbabwe was getting independence. Now, this makes me think that it now takes me to a scenario where they struggle for independence. This was not because it manifests 61 years later. That bleak situation under colonialism that you can find out through anthropological studies with the songs and the sayings in our community, which is very available, until a child was born in 1962. But before this child is born, I want to point out one unique situation that manifests later. In 1962, the East-West Cold War was at its climax. But for some reason, the Americans and the Soviet Union jointly supported our independence. You'd wonder, why would two enemies join to support an independence? The Americans had come on stage as a world power, but the Europeans still controlled the economies of the colonies. Britain, France, and the rest. So America wanted the Europeans out so that they would join. The Soviet Union had had 1917 Bolshevik Revolution, the Workers' Revolution. So for them, they are revolutionary. They wanted a colonialist out. So this is clearly manifested in the United Nations resolutions that were passed in New York of right to self-determination. You know what is it? But why would America and the Soviet Union support this? This came to be manifested in the American interest later that actually tied our hands. So this therefore pushed us to the Bretton Woods system, IMF, World Bank, because these powers now realize that they have withdrawn from the economy. We need to control it from behind. And sooner or later, we were in a debt. For some time, the balance of payment was okay. We moved in, even during a Min's regime, coffee was still selling, we were better off, but soon we're in debt. And the debt went up and up and up until it was written off. It has come back again.
Major, it would be good for you to elaborate on who were better off during Amin's period.
I said in as far as coffee.
Without debt.
No, I'm saying the balance of payment during Amin's was not so bad because coffee selling was okay. And therefore you could see the debt burden. Because debt is in figures. Figures don't lie. Figures don't lie. You can simply check the figures then and figures later. So figures don't lie, even if you have any political interest. Figures don't lie. So now, the alliance of the two arch enemies manifested itself in 1971. Why? Obote was alleged to be going to the left. Going to the left means going to Soviet Union, socialist. Then those in the right, the Americans and the British, organized kick out Obote. When they kick out Obote, that now brings in a new political dimension from the main regime, and it couples up with the chasing of the Asians who are really controlling the factories. Asians here meaning the Indians, Pakistani, Bangladesh. Sometimes you see them on the street, you don't differentiate, but those are three people. Now, the economy went down to the extent that you now think the problem of salt is that when you eat too much salt, you will get pressure. But by then, from January to December, there was no salt. January to December, there was no salt. Around 77, 78, whatever there was no salt. Completely. No sugar. Of course, sugar you can forgo, but salt was not there. People would burn leaves of trees, squeeze it, and get the... Yes, the cardo, and then make it into salt. That was how bad it is. Because, partly because of the chasing of the Asians who left. So, and now, why I was mentioning the two enemies meeting, because now the interest of two enemies now manifest in 71. So, all this now is how we came in. Remember, when a child is born, naturally, a child should cry to show that the world is a hostile world. But did you know that when a child is born in 62, there was only celebration? Well, Uganda is a legal entity. I don't know whether it cried, but the parents around and the brothers and sisters celebrate. And once a child doesn't cry at birth, some people have taken the crying of a child at birth in that some people fought for independence. Mau Mau in Kenya, Mozambique, they fought, Angola, they fought, others, Zimbabwe, they fought. But for us, we didn't. So a child was born in peace, in a happiness, but sooner or later, the child got in problem. So I just like to say the chronological aspect had all these aspects of the child born. In other words, this child was born and plunged into a Cold War, which led into overthrow of a government, which led into economic instability, led into debts, and we stayed in it up to now. All attempts now being made are just rebellion to remedy. And all the interventions now are remedy institutions. So, as far as parliament is concerned, even all those aspects came in. East, west, we see. Who is west, who is east, it manifested in parliament. But as I said, I would at this stage not want to go to parliament because I believe my two colleagues are more expert into it. They can bring the dimension of independence in parliament. But I really thought it was good to bring that as historical aspect of how before independence and up to now.
Okay, thank you very much. And of course, we shall be delving into more contemporary issues as we go along. But the question was bounced to you. The journey of parliament together with our journey as a nation, of course, starting from 1920 when we first had that body. I recently realized that the LegCo actually sat at Civic Hall, the dining. So that journey coming towards independence, and then, you know, the first parliament, the years of Amin, where there was nothing going on. The second Obote II government, we had a parliament. We had the National Resistance Council, the 6th parliament, which is praised a lot. Moving on, 8th, 9th, 10th, where he sat in the 9th and 10th, and now the 11th parliament. What's your take on parliament's contribution to our national journey?
So first of all, you know that it's extremely hard to look at the journey of parliament in isolation.
Yes.
The questions how parliament operates has largely been informed until today how the national politics, the national conversations, and how the national conversations are going informs what's happening in parliament.
Yes.
And one of the biggest challenges that parliament is struggling with, just to define the process, has been the overarching process of the executive in terms of determining how parliament operates. what sort of trajectory and discussions are ongoing here, but also decisions. Two, you can clearly see the unclear understanding of the roles and how Parliament should operate. Whereas even today we have clear parameters in which the Constitution provides in light of the mandate of Parliament. You have a total understanding from the public of what is expected of the members. And so there's a bit of confusion, and so it becomes a bit extremely hard to even execute this mandate, because you find members of Parliament, while they're trying to balance the roles that are they're constitutionally charged with, they also have to balance with what's happening in the constituency, which also is a. But I think by and large you can see that Parliament has undergone, has metamorphosized, and clearly you can see that it has made a great contribution towards the democracy of our country. And you can see that the question of self-determination, Parliament comes in very, very key. Because right from independence, the three arms of government have always been there.
Yes.
But if you look at the journey in terms of the political dispensation, they have had a direct impact on how Parliament operates and how Parliament executes its mandate. And so to some extent, you can see Parliament sometimes also being victim. In 1966, at the time when Obote was taking over, and that's when the pigeonhole constitution comes in place. You can see that Parliament is, how even that sort of constitution comes in place, you see Parliament being hijacked, and the constitution comes in place, you can see, and the subsequent Parliament, in terms of them clearly executing their mandate is concerned, you see that there's a bit of an overarching impact from the executive. And so right from the start, you can see that Parliament has always found itself in a very peculiar corner to clearly execute its mandate, but also hold the executive accountable. Now, if you look at, for example, today where we have clear roles, where Parliament is charged with the mandate of legislating, budgeting, oversight, and the representation role. The ability to execute that mandate is dependent and is hinged on the politics, the politics of the day. And that's why you've actually had the conversation of the tyranny of numbers, which of course it can still be used in the advantage of the ruling government. But by and large, if I had to look at it overall, I think that Parliament has contributed to the growth of the democracy, but they have been held captive by the executive, thus hindering their ability to execute their mandate well. But just to give a bit of a comment, I think on Uganda at 61, I think that at the time when we were getting our independence, we had three major challenges that we thought that with the independence in place, we should be able to address. The question of the health, we thought maybe now with the self-determination, maybe our health system, our access, affordability, and all these things will be better. Two, in light of education, was also one of those things that the foolishness, just to interpret it directly, the question of foolishness there, which we thought that it would be addressed with going to school and bring on board the education. And then the other thing was the ability to feel being in a country that you belong. And there were many other things really, but those seem to stand out. If you were to look at the concerns, for example, which I highlighted, that there could be a section of people who feel that we were better off under the colonial system as opposed to the self-determination. Is because the oppression, the challenges, and the perspective, even in terms of how you look at your country, has not changed. Or probably you're in a worse off state than as it was then. So if you look at, for example, the question of education, I know that we've achieved a lot, and the country has made a number of strides. But you can clearly that if you look at the amount of resources, the energy, and all the journey that we've moved, it's not it's not in line with our investment. It's and so recently I was looking at the report by the IGG, and IGG says that we lose close to 11 trillion or 10 trillion for in a year due to corruption. I don't know how that is computed clearly, but that's a huge amount of money affecting service delivery. The questions of human rights, the questions of corruption, the question of human rights, the question of the state of the economy. The young people, you definitely have a huge chunk of young people being the majority. Their future seems to be at the hand of course. It's not very clear. Things are not clear, and so as we stand today as a country, there's more division. There is no cohesion. The country is actually more divided. And I have actually held the position that if it was possible for the remaining period of President Museveni in power, if he could actually concentrate in bringing the country together, addressing the questions of division, the roads, we shall come and address those. The other developments, we shall come and address. The future generation will address those. But if you are leading a country that is heavily divided, there are a lot of interest, but also people do not feel in a country that they are in. What we are seeing in some of these countries that we started discussing, the Palestine and many of these other countries, you clearly see that there is tension brewing. And you are leading a country, you will actually achieve development, and at a specific point, all of that will go down. And so I think that even as we look at the country at its 61st birthday, I think it's a point of reflection in terms of where we are today. Are Ugandans? Do Ugandans feel more proud of their country? What sort of leadership do they put in place, and how are they accountable? And so I think it's a point of reflection, but also understanding what is there for us and how best can we take advantage of it.
Yes, thank you very much. Of course, in law school, the issue around executive, moving into, overarching power into the legislature is always denoted in the case of Rema Tofu, or the ghost of Rema Tofu. But we'll continue with that discussion, I think, further in depth. But we are honored to have Honorable Atiku Bernard, who was sat in the 9th and 10th Parliament, but also is the chairperson of Arua District Land Board. You're most welcome.
Arua City Land Board. We have Arua District and Arua City.
Arua City, yes.
Thank you very much. Feel threatened.
And we saw that hopefully one of your stadiums will be used for AFCON. But you're most welcome. Of course, the discussion today is rotating around Parliament and whether it has achieved its mandate. Yesterday we saw a brewing fight between the Honorable from Rakai, Honorable Juliet. The other name is difficult for my Luo tongue, but and bickering with, of course, Honorable Francis Zake in Parliament, which led to the suspension of the House. From an ordinary Ugandan's perspective, it leaves one to wonder whether Parliament is actually performing for the citizens. We have a lot of problems, but yet we see Parliament that seems to indulge in such acts. But as you discuss whether Parliament is actually delivering on its mandate, of course you've been in there. We'd also like to give you a minute or two to reflect on Uganda at 61.
Thank you very much, our hosts and the panelists. Came in late, but this is a topic which has been on many media platforms under discussion before on the eve of Independence Celebration Anniversary, and also on the day itself. We all know that every 9th of October, it's a commemoration that everybody enjoins together with the head of state to reflect on what we call self-rule. It's of course something that we pride in, that for the 61 years we have been under self-rule. There are a number of things we have achieved as a country, but also there's a challenge on our shoulders to carry this country forward. And I would like to associate with the history or historical background that retired Major Awich gave us. If you are to assess the challenges that we have faced as a country, some of the basis for the current challenges we are facing arise from those historical mistakes or interests. Because one would say, I mean, why would people even bother to celebrate Independence Day? Because Uganda has been here, and the people living in Uganda have been here. Most of us who call ourselves Ugandans know that our ancestry originates from within. Much as we might have migrated from different locations, but this now is our country. So all these conglomerations of establishment of countries and what, to me, are foreign. Because before the colonial powers came in, Africans were living. There were no boundaries. And they traded among themselves. They lived among themselves. I mean, lived their lives either by hunting or by gathering or by, whatever, harvesting in the wilderness. But that was their way of life, how God created them. And so all of a sudden we see this perspective of people coming from nowhere and coming to disorganize the traditional establishments. What we now call Uganda traditionally was Buganda. We have had this common say, people say, actually the name Uganda originated from Buganda. The Muzungu failed to pronounce Buganda and decided to call it Uganda. Our brothers in DRC call us Uganda. Instead of B, they put O first.
Tanzanians call us Waganda.
Waganda, exactly. Even Kenyans.
Waganda, Waganda.
So for them,
that's why they actually refer to Uganda.
So really, and yet for me, I know I'm a Nilotic from West Nile, Lubara there. You know yourself as Anacholi. My brother here could be from Sebei region there. So those were there. Those were nations, actually. We should call them, I think, nations. Major. Now, we did exist, and we had our systems of governance.
True.
What has transitioned into the current parliament got its basis from Buganda Luchiko. The Buganda kingdom had its governance system under the Kabaka. And of course, now when these colonialists, the British, came in, they studied, of course, when they sent the missionaries to do for them research. How are these societies organized? How can we penetrate? And eventually, they embedded their system into the Buganda system, which eventually they spread all over
the country.
If we are to analyze how the British governed the colonial territories, in Kenya they used direct rule. In Uganda they used indirect rule, because they found a traditional system here, which they left intact, but they tried so much to see that they blended it to be able to pursue their interests.
There's a book, I think, that Uganda, Indian colony.
So they did that, and that's why places like West Nile, they now had to introduce the Buganda system of administration. This is what you call the chiefdoms, because Buganda had chiefs or chiefdoms, which formed the Buganda Kingdom.
Yes.
So when you go to Acholi, you go to West Nile, we have chiefdoms. My own grandfather was the last chief of Ayivu County. But those were the systems now the British used. And eventually, when we got independence, they remained as modes of administration. How local governments started now operating up to date until they, you know, of course, evolved into constituencies, then removed as administrative units. Initially, they were administrative units, LC4s. Then eventually they were removed. We now have the sub-county system. Under the PDM, it has now gone to parish development system. Parishes are now being elevated to perform the roles of the sub-counties, which roles initially were performed by counties. So you can now see how the independence influence, or the colonial influence into our system of governance has influenced the way of life.
True.
Now, coming to how our parliament, of course, from legislature to the first parliament, where the prime minister actually was the head of the state, more powerful than the president, because he was in charge of the people who were representing the people on the ground, the constituencies. I think at that time we had the likes of, in my area, the likes of late Gaspero Da and others. A few of them, about 3 or 4 people, representing the whole of West Nile in the first parliament. Now, that's why the number, actually the size of the current parliament was for a smaller team of representatives. And those are the people who, you know, saw off the cutting of, you know, when Major was talking about, talking here, he was talking about a child being born. Now, these people who transited from legislature to the first parliament are the ones who cut the umbilical cord of colonialism and ushering independence in our country. Now, what did these people do? Some of the things that you see, you know, one would say, yes, we got independence. But now we still have these invisible hands controlling us. I would say we are still under colonialism, what we now call neo-colonialism. I don't know whether it has even now moved, because when you bring on board the era of ICT, we actually they call it the global village. It's actually now they call it global village. But when you look at the global village, what is our influence in the global village as Ugandans? Are we consumers? Do we invent anything to put into the global market? Because when you're talking of the global village, it's about consumption and transaction of business. So what is it that we're putting out there? So in this process, Parliament has evolved over time. And we needed to divide this 61 years by 5 to give us the number of parliaments we have had. Now, of course, looking at our political history, where we had the disruptions that Major talked about, the Cold Power, the Cold War, destabilizing the takeoff of our democracy. When Obote took over as the prime minister, the first prime minister, and therefore also the head of state, while we had the president who was the Kabaka Mwanga. Is it
Mutesa.
Mutesa 1, yes. Mutesa 2, Mutesa 1.
Mutesa 2. Mutesa 1 was 18.
So Mutesa 2 was the pseudo president. But the prime minister became the overall head of state with all the powers. So meaning parliament at that time was very powerful because all decisions of the state were taken on the floor of parliament. And that became one of the first points of conflict, where the Kabaka started questioning, if all the decisions are being made in parliament, and yet you are saying I'm the president. I mean, what sort of leadership is this? So if that is the case, you take parliament or government out of Buganda, so that I can administer my kingdom with the full influence, because the Kabaka felt his powers of authority were undermined. Now that is the point where problems started, and indeed the Kabaka Yeka party started conflicting with the DP. I think did they build alliance or what?
Yes, there was an alliance.
There was an alliance of Kabaka Yeka with the one of the parties.
UPC, actually.
UPC. Yeah.
To isolate DP.
To isolate DP, which was the majority. So, anyway, I don't get the dynamics, because if it was against
that was before they broke off. Before the UPC broke off with Kabaka again. But to access power, it was an alliance of Kabaka Yeka and UPC.
Yes. So now you can see those dynamics, how they played out within the premises of parliament, causing instability. Instead of building cohesion, people started building camps. Now, that is how our problems started. And indeed, that parliament did not last for long. That's how the 1966 crisis came about. And effectively, it led to what we call the pigeonhole constitution. Because the constitution is a very powerful tool of governance. We call it the supreme law, the supreme governing law of a country. Now, if somebody goes and drafts a constitution and comes to distribute it in the pigeonholes, the pigeonhole represents every constituency. And yet, by, for the process of enacting a constitution is very tedious. You must get the interest, the voices of the people. You must consult them. This was not done. And indeed, these were the points where now all interests started coming in. And indeed, Obote regime could not last.
As we conclude, so that we get a round of questions, but you can finish your point.
Yes. So you could see now, from the first parliament, we had that instability, and eventually we got the second parliament. Then Amin comes in, usurps all powers and rules for about 8 years. Without the influence of the mention of parliament anywhere. Then we come in, there comes in the second Obote, which was, is it the fourth parliament? And of course, also there was instability. Where the military, should I call the military, second Obote regime had a lot of acrimony. There were interests. Even there are those who wanted to begin also attempting to grab the power. And that's how the likes of the current president started picking political interests, even as students, because they're analyzing the weaknesses of the current leadership, who were also young at that time. So, from Obote 2 until 1980, it was...
1990?
1980, when the NRA group decided to go to the bush. There was a lot of fighting. There were coups here and there. That's why we had is it the Gang of Four? Is it the Tito Okello regime? Now, all these, as they were happening, parliament was weakened. And every time these interests, these groups grabbed the power, they came on the steps of parliament to announce that they have taken authority. Meaning, powers were centered around the parliament. So, from 1986, after Museveni taking over, as a good student of the chaos that took place from independence to 1980, he decided now to say, what do we do? First of all, he banished all political parties, because those were where some of the problems started from. People aligning according to tribe, people aligning according to religion. So for him, he admonished political parties and said, let us go as a mass.
Honorable, our time is running fast.
So we now see the National Resistance Council coming in. that eventually prepared the way for the constituency assembly, which now puts in place the 1995 constitution, under which now we talk of the current democracy with its own weaknesses.
Yes, thank you.
That has given us, that gave us the 6th parliament, the 7th parliament, the 8th parliament, the 9th parliament, 10th and 11th.
Thank you very much for that discourse. Of course, shall be getting back into that contemporary democracy. But I would like to move back to you, retired Major. There was a discussion that started with Comrade Timothy around, the overarching power of the executive in Parliament. Of course, we first saw it in 1966. But in 2018, during the amendment of the constitution processes, we also saw an attack on Parliament by security forces. What do you make of this? Of course, according to Benjamin Odoki, there is supposed to be a balance of powers, but where does that start and where does it stop? Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Executive, legislature. I will answer that. But I like to just throw in like a general comment on issues like legal notice. We have talked of government changing and Parliament changing. It is worth knowing and sharing with views that legal notice one or legal notices one have been many times in Uganda. Legal notice one normally is a proclamation that a government has been changed. Like NRM came to power by legal notice 1 of 1986.
Yes.
UNLF government came by legal notice 1 of 1979. So it is worth noting that the many legal notices brought in so many changes and it impacts on Parliament. And remember, in constitutional law, when you overthrow a government and put in that legal notice and you're a government, even whoever tries to overthrow in the evening will be charged of treason. That you're overthrowing illegally a constitutional government. But you also came through the same. Doesn't matter whether you come through the same. Now what? So I've had several notices changing governments, and I just thought it was
Major, people point that to 1966. You've talked of Uganda being born, and many people pointed that the point. Of course, there are democracies that have not had these legal notices, and they say the point at which the legal notice, which can still happen, is because in 1966 we had that point where the pigeonhole, which was of course not a legal notice, but in substance had the same purpose.
Well, that is interpretative, but that is what happened. So it is subject to interpretation by anybody else, whether it is legal notice or not. But I like also, before I answer your question, to view, I thought would come from my colleagues from Parliament, but they have said it, but I would just like to add, to view Parliament and Uganda at 61. I want to make that linkage. For example, we are 61 years. Are we free to make laws? Our colonizers went. I think we are not free to make laws to some extent. For example, how do you interpret that a sovereign state comes with a law against homosexuality and power said scrap it? Ideally, Parliament is a General Assembly. The 45 million people cannot sit in that house. The 45 million people sit through their representatives. Now, if they follow due processes and came up with a law, ideally that law should stand. If it did not follow, the courts of law can challenge. But here you are saying you are an independent country, 61 years, you come up with a law and they say forget about your law.
But Major, isn't that the epitome of a Republican constitutional democracy? That while in a democracy in its raw meaning, the majority takes the rule, but where there's a Republican constitutional democracy, people have, even those who are minor, as long as they have some rights, they need to be protected.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. The challenge should be from inside. But now I'm talking in terms of independence.
Mm.
That rather than the challenge coming from inside, the order is coming from outside.
Mm.
I'm relating it with
I
independence.
understand, yes.
Yes.
The inside,
Yes.
the power.
The other thing is laws from outside. Did you know that our parliament sometimes pass laws which are just inserted? For example, procurement laws.
Mm.
You find provisions in the Procurement Act, which says in every procurement, a donor's interest shall be ultimate. So you can even go and bid and do what you want in bidding. If a donor stands up and said, throw that away. And that is in our laws. You have laws like genetic laws. Everybody was at arms about it. Whether genetic plans was okay. Some people believe that the genetic law introduced a situation, unlike in the past where we would produce maize, grow the maize, break the red one, hang it up, plant in the other season.
Mm.
We are now going to have a system where every seed that you plant, you import from America.
Mm.
And these genetic laws were
It's
passed.
happening in Nigeria now.
So you have this kind of laws in our parliament. How about budgets? Parliament is the only body which can make budget.
Mm.
But did you know that even before our parliament passes budget, IMF, World Bank have to say, check that page. Sometimes budget are changed at the last minute because powers that be dictate. And yet appropriation budgeting is the work of parliament. So I just wanted to say this so that we really, now that we are discussing parliament, we compare parliament and independence. Are we that independence? Others will say we're independent, we make laws, we do this. But I just like to draw attention that to some extent, our 61 years, there's a lot to worry about parliament. The kind of laws that we pass ourselves, the laws that are brought to us, you must pass this. How our budgets, you can't do it the way you want it. IMF, World Bank will ring and say, page 20, change this. From page 20.
The budget is not balancing.
Balance is not budgeting. Then what sovereignty is that? So I thought I would bring this to say that much as we are 61 years, in respect to parliament, we still have a lot of challenges in independence as it is.
Interesting.
Now, about the executive and a legislature in our independence, is that our independence is that is a theory that has long been discussed. All of us are subject to our interpretation, but we all know that they intertwine. Some scholars think it is theoretical because the parliament to sit, money is provided by executive. So a lot of things that surround it. So some people think the relation between the two are mere theoretical.
Yeah, thank you very much.
But I needed to come in. You see, Major asked
we shall start with your point in the second segment. Our dear viewers, please thank you for sticking with us through this conversation. We shall be proceeding on several points, including issues around parliament, that the contemporary issue we had yesterday. We have issues around women members of parliament. How has that contribution been thus far? And several other factors that affect the parliament, which of course is the epitome or the symbol of our democracy and the representation of every single Ugandan. Stick with us for the second segment.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back to the second segment of Focus on Parliament here on Civic Space TV, where we are discussing Uganda at 61, of course, with a spotlight on Parliament. Before we broke off, we had a point that was coming in very hot from Honorable Bernard. Would like to have that before we proceed with my comrade Timothy.
Thank you. Major did pose a question about the role of Parliament in guaranteeing our independence.
Yes.
And when I was submitting earlier, I did mention that the colonial powers, when, of course, we are getting independence, they tended to withdraw their face, but maintained invisible hands. Now, these invisible hands actually descended on the major arms of government, the legislature, the judiciary, and executive. All these three arms of government have a control from these invisible hands. Now, how Parliament has been controlled is in the mandate that Parliament is supposed to be playing. In the resource allocation, of course, Major alluded to issues of budgeting. Now, when every time...
Did you experience this when you were...
Yes, we have several times. Good enough, I sat in the Committee of National Economy. And the Committee of the National Economy scrutinizes all loan requests.
Yes.
These loans which come from World Bank, from African Development Bank, whichever loan that government procures comes on the floor of Parliament as a loan request. It is sent to Committee of National Economy. The committee processes it, brings a report before Parliament. Parliament debates and approves or disapproves. But of course, in most cases, Parliament approves these loan requests. And those are the resources which, of course, now government uses for delivering services and what have you.
Yes.
Now, this has happened from the time we got our independence. And that has been one of the means of controlling this country. And that's the point where we question whether we are fully independent, partially independent, or not independent at all. Now, when you look at our debt burden at the moment, we have almost surpassed, our budget is actually not balancing at all. We have very little resources raised locally through taxes or tax collection, or what you call the revenue of the country. But more of the money is borrowed. Just a few days ago, we heard that government is going to borrow about $2.3 trillion to do roads or to do infrastructure in our country. Now, this is money that is going to be borrowed. Now, and this money is supposed to be borrowed from the World Bank. Now, when you ask yourself, when was the World Bank established? The IMF, when did they come into play? These are institutions that came into play even before we got independence. And exactly. And who are the shareholders in these institutions, financial institutions? The colonial powers. They have bigger shares.
It also means we did not attend the foundational meetings.
Exactly. So that is the point where the question Major asked becomes of interest to all of us, or must be of interest to all of us as Ugandans, because without economic independence, you have no rights, or you are not independent at all.
Yeah.
Because Those are areas where, situations where, for instance, when we try to pass laws, the World Bank comes in to say, we are cutting further funding to you, or we are no longer going to give you financial support. Now, that clearly brings out the face of colonialism, meaning that, of course, World Bank does not speak for itself. World Bank is speaking for its shareholders. This is the US, it's the Great Britain that is speaking through the World Bank, meaning the invisible hands of colonialism are still at play in our country. And therefore, Parliament is still being remote controlled.
Yes.
And that means we are not
for
fully independent.
Yes, thank you, Honorable, for that. Of course, complements his point. And I must say it's something that is easily forgotten when we discuss independence. That sort of direct control within Parliament where laws are made. I would like to move on to you, Mr. Chemonges. Before Right Honorable Jacob Olanya passed away, I think he had been elected. He had been elected Speaker, of course, of the 11th Parliament. And one of the key aspects he talked about was quality of debate. And he said it's one of the things he really wanted to work on. Unfortunately, we didn't get the chance to see that, but he looked pretty convicted. Of course, that stemmed from his experience as Deputy Speaker in the previous parliaments. What do you make of the kind of debate or the quality of debate that we have in our current parliament? Of course, the resounding contrast normally comes from the older parliaments. People praise the 6th parliament and say even censured ministers. Yeah, what do you make of the current quality of debate in parliament?
So I think just maybe before I respond to that, there is something that I would want to speak, especially to the question of independence and how we're still being controlled by the other invisible hands. I think while that may be true, I think that there is a level, the question of governance in this country is still at stake. The question of the kind of leadership that we currently have, outside the conversation of actually the invisible hands and the colonial powers, you can clearly see that, while to be really objective, if you look at what is happening both at Parliament, and we seem to agree that most of the things that happen at Parliament, most of them derive from the executive. If it's legislation, it's the same. You have the budgeting. The president is the substantive minister of. So most of those things derive, they have a source from the executive. The question, of course, representation, still you bring your matters and the executive is still supposed to act on them. And so you find that Parliament is still fairly in a captive state, where while you would want, there are questions to do with the budget of the country. If you look at the corruption and try to link it with the question of independence, it's purely large a question of governance. If you have, as Honorable says, the resources that we have, recently we passed a 52.7 trillion budget. Now, we expect that close to 29 trillion is going to be collected locally. And out of that, you have close to 27 trillion going towards settling and fulfilling the obligations that we've had, including loans. You leave yourself to close to 25 trillion. Of the 25, you have close to 7.3 going to salaries and wages. You have other resources going to gratuity, pension, and all these other resources. You're left with very minimal resource towards development. And IGG is reminding you and telling you that you have close to 11 trillion going towards corruption. So you do not have any resource towards development. So it's a big question. And so while the question of independence is actually it's a good conversation, the question of governance and the question of how the leadership in the country plays is key. Because if you look at, we've placed ourselves in a state where if we currently stand close to 86.6 trillion debt, of which you're supposed to pay. if you look at what they have done, there's clearly very minimal, very little to be seen. The rate the rate of return in terms of the benefit, there is something that can be debated. And so while there could be discussions around how the colonial, how the invisible hands, we are still in a trap. I think we've slowly taken ourselves in that trap. And I think much of the blame still comes to us. Because the question of that, if we had proper leadership and a very sober sort of systems, we would be in a better state. But I think it's a continuous conversation.
I think it links to the question that I asked as well.
Yeah.
In terms of the feeling of accountability, because quality of debate comes from the need to feel accountable. But in a dispensation where there's maybe corruption, then the need for that ceases.
Absolutely. So I think the ultimate and the best question is that Parliament takes its decisions in the best interest of the country. And that must be based on the question of evidence. But I think more often, given the fact that there are interests at play, and you have also to be alive of the current prevailing issues in the country. But I think the Parliament progressively, as while at a rhetoric level, desire to ensure that its decisions, both at budgeting, at legislating, is informed with evidence. Sometimes, more often, you realize that there are more the politics of the day, the interest at stake, actually takes the day. And so, for me, I think that also that also looks at it from the leadership of Parliament, because the leadership of Parliament has a lot to do with how Parliament operates.
That is the office of the Speaker.
Office of the Speaker. But also you have the other offices, such as the leader of opposition and the government chief whip, who also have a key role in terms of how Parliament operates largely, and how the sort of systems and sort of. But ultimately, the question of leadership at Parliament comes in play in terms of how Parliament operates, the decisions that are taken, how members are treated, and how Parliament largely, even in terms of how it's viewed by the public, is concerned. And so I think Parliament also, and I think it still goes back to the issue of really where you find that can Parliament independently make its decisions? Are they able to hold the executive to account? We've seen the executive not attending even some of these plenary. You will find Parliament actually has to adjourn because there is no minister.
Yes.
And so there is no one to account. And Parliament finds itself in a state where they cannot hold some of these ministers. Yet they have the power. They can censure them. You have Parliament censuring a minister, and there is no action taken. I know it's still it's at the discretion of the appointing authority to take action. But you see Parliament taking action, and so I think that you still find that Parliament is in a state where they cannot independently make the decision. If you look at even the journey of how some of these laws come in place. Yeah, so I think that even as we discuss all this topic, the ultimate question is, to what end can Parliament position itself and come out very strongly that they can take the decision independent? I know that there are checks and balances. We are not in a system where Parliament operates in its own sort of world. But Parliament can take on firm decisions in terms of accountability, hold the executive accountable.
But part of the question was, why does this capacity seem to have diminished? Because why do people, for example, refer to an older Parliament sit and say, oh, they censured a minister or two, and they were able to account, and there was that energy. But fast forward, it's almost inconceivable that a minister can be censured by Parliament.
I mean, you see, if you look at the difference, it's largely based on the leadership that the two parliaments had. But also, of course, there is a difference in terms of composition of the two parliaments. But the leadership of Parliament largely has a lot of take in how Parliament operates and the decisions that they take. Because you find that there are decisions that while we may want to say that the executive interferes on or makes some move on, there are certain things that are purely just within the discretion of Parliament.
Yes.
And even when they do so, they may not necessarily be appointed by the executive. So there are questions to do with ministers not coming to Parliament. I think you do not need a rocket science from the executive. These are matters which Parliament and the leadership can take a very firm decisions. In terms of the quality of appointees by the president, I know that the president, and it's in the best interest of the president for some of the people he appoints to go through. But Parliament should be very firm and clearly ensure that the people being appointed, Parliament should check them so that we do not have some of these lags being seen, where you find that you have leaders and you are wondering, do they qualify to the positions that they did? Yet Parliament, which was supposed to sieve, but also check that, also finds itself in the questioning. So I think there is need for leadership. Really.
Thank you very much. You do highlight the importance of leadership, or what a speaker or a leader of parliament can mean in terms of the general operations. I would like to come to you, Honorable. You participated in, I believe, 3 elections.
Yeah.
Yes. In terms of the composition of parliament, which has talked about, what do you tell from these elections? What are the citizens looking out for when they are selecting an MP? We had a phenomenon in the last election where people were saying things like vote umbrella. We shall hear them after the first vote. And
Actually, they say, and courtesy of my brother, the spokesperson of police, or Enanga, they said, vote anything umbrella. They even added, even if it is a Nanga, we shall sort out. So I said, is my brother the worst case scenario? Is my brother the worst case scenario? So they said, vote anything umbrella. Even if it is a Nanga, we shall sort later.
So do you think the citizens are looking out for the right kind of leaders, or we have now degenerated into waves like we saw in the last election? Yes.
No, I think the framers of the 1995 Constitution, that time, did not foresee the issue of qualification for a member of parliament.
But there's
they did not understand the implication of putting senior 6 as the bare minimum.
Or its equivalent.
Or its equivalent, exactly. Now, senior 6.
Or equivalent.
Or equivalent. That means even somebody who has gone through a vocational training. My late MP for Arua municipality, Honorable Biriga, when they asked him at the NRM secretariat, when they asked him for his equivalent, he gathered workshop certificates of participation. And he first handed in one which was for 2 weeks. And Tango, he said, no, this is not what I want. I want equivalent. He said, okay, I have 30 of them. I'll bring 30. You can add them to make the equivalent. Now, that is the kind of drama that has ensued after people perceiving this minimum qualification of A level as a parameter for one to become a member of parliament. Now, we have now moved to a situation where, and indeed, when we look at parliament, when you call somebody a member of parliament, this person should be able to analyze a document, peruse through a document, make out deduce a huge document to a small, let's say 1-page piece of information that he can use to articulate or amplify whatever situation his constituency is having. Now we have, in the parliament there, we are given different committees. The moment you are sworn in, parliament constitutes the committees.
Yes.
And once these committees are constituted, that means you are given a sector. When you are given a sector, you are given a ministry. Now, your mandate as a member of that committee is to scrutinize the documents that come from that ministry. Now, you send a member of parliament who doesn't have, who has a bare minimum of equivalent of A level. He has never gone to university where critical thinking is taught, analytical skills are taught, research skills are taught. A member of parliament should be able to research on his own. If there's a task ahead, you know, in the 9th and 10th parliament, we used to get the order paper for the next 1 week. You get them ahead of time. Then you should be able to look at the order paper and say, this subject, what information do I need? Either go to the library. We have a library in parliament there. We are assigned researchers. We are assigned policy analysts. We are assigned economists. Now, these are all the resources at the display of a member of parliament who should be able to tell, if you don't have the time, you should be able to give this assignment to a researcher to quickly go and peruse through. And what is this research process required? I mean, why is it required? It is required because you need the facts. The late Right Honorable Olaa said, if you have not researched, don't come on the floor of parliament to stand to speak. I will not pick you. Because Olaa was a very, very intelligent guy. He would read your lips, he would read your body language and know that you are not ready to speak. And you would see members there standing until the end of the session. He will not give such members of parliament an opportunity. So now, those are the kind of demands of the kind of member of parliament that we need in the institution called the parliament.
I just have information.
Yes, please.
So in this 11th parliament,
Yes.
actually it's one of the most educated parliaments that we've had so far. We have close to 39% at least having a master's degree. We have close to 37% having bachelor's degree. You have 9% having postgraduate diploma. You have 3.1% having PhD degrees, 7.7% a diploma, and then we have at least A level, 3.7%. It is the most educated parliament. And Awich says that the data is not correct. I think that this is actually very correct. I was part of the people who actually sat down, tabulated this one by one, and it's actually true.
Now, that of course, that data could be right or correct, but the question is, in the output of parliament, do we see these qualifications at play in terms of debate on the floor of parliament? Because we watch parliament session or parliamentary sessions every day, from Tuesday to Thursday. In the committees, do we see, much of the work of parliament is actually done at committee level. That's where you now, the issue of qualification.
But what about the trainings? Because I understand if they are educated in their fields, it may not necessarily be civics or political work, but what about the refresher training that is given to MPs?
No, in the parliament, what they do is orientation. They take you through the etiquette of parliament. The dress code, the feeding, of course, there are other orientations, how you do committee work. Those are basics. The rest of it, you're expected to know. Oh. When they say bare minimum of A level, we expect that people of bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD should be the one in that house. And that is where you lessen the work, or you ease the work of parliament as an institution. You ease the work of even executive, because when the executive is picking people from among the members of parliament to be ministers, they should be able to look at the CV of these individuals.
Honorable, what about the voters? What's their role?
Now, for the voters, it is all about, you see,
those who just tick a wave.
We have come from a point where initially, yes, the parliament was small. At that time, the population was also small. And that's why in the beginning we had about 4 or 5 people representing a whole region like West Nile. But as time went by, we started zeroing it down to constituencies. Now, these days, the constituencies have become districts. And the other day, it was said every one constituency district must have 2 constituencies. So meaning even the constituencies have been divided into either 2 or 3. So that's why you have seen the numbers. Now, we have a huge parliament with varying qualifications and exposure in the field of research, in the field of analysis, critical analysis, in the field of communication. Communication skills is very important. So now that's the kind of parliament we have, where we have so many, and it's difficult now to get the time to be able to speak. I've said the parliament has assigns researchers or officers who are technical to help these members of parliament. But looking at the numbers, if all of them utilize these resources at a time, there will not be enough. But even when they're available, in my experience in the 9th and 10th parliament, there are members of parliament who left the 9th parliament without even interacting with the researcher, without utilizing the services of an economist, without utilizing the services of a policy analyst. We are policy analysts. Actually, a member of parliament is a policy analyst. By the time I left parliament, the 9th and 10th parliament, I had successfully tabled 2 bills, private members' bills, because the things that I thought I should concentrate on, matters of children or children's welfare and what have you, I put my time and attention into researching into them, into consulting about them, and that's how we were able to amend the Children's Act. That's how I was able to introduce the Prevention and Prohibition of Human Sacrifice Act, a bill, and then it became an act, because I looked at the data. I looked at what was the information that was being published in the media.
Thank you very
and took
much.
interest. And
Thank you very much, Honorable.
That is how our parliament is what it is today, because we have not taken interest in, grounding ourselves to the qualification of who becomes a member of parliament. Leave alone the issue of voters. Voters will always go by the wave. But who are these people who come? We have people who have come to parliament because they have been digging graves. We have people who have been mingling at funerals because they have become popular among the mourners. They are in parliament. We have people who have been associating with youth during youth activities. They are in parliament. So for the voter, it is about socialization.
But thank you very much, Honorable. We still have a couple of questions that I want to run through.
Please.
But we do appreciate and commend the work you did, especially with bringing up those very important bills. Retired Major Pollar, which we cannot, of course, distance the national resistance movement from the parliament. You've held the majority from the beginning of the multi-party dispensation. Do you think it has largely been a success? The dominance of NRM within the legislature, has it been something that NRM is proud of? And of course, we expect that will continue to dominate in 2026 and going forward.
Okay, I will answer
but
that.
But you had a comment also.
Yeah, on this one, on the quality of debate. The quality of debate, I think we should agree that it's substandard.
Okay.
You can see, I think there was even a social media information that circulated where a member of parliament talked something completely opposite. A minister yeah. talked something completely opposite. He thought it was, what do I remember? He thought it was this and it was the other. So the debate is poor. And you can see the manifestation is the in-depth of the debate. We still have debaters who, instead of newspapers picking from their submission and writing, they pick from the newspaper and bring to the house.
On the floor.
And yet the law, the rules doesn't allow bringing hearsay from the newspaper. But you find a member of parliament thinks it's quite okay to say, Mr. Speaker, the red paper said this. How? It is you as an MP who should raise point and red paper reports, not the other way around. So you find members still debating what is in the newspaper. Now, the other thing, money. Money has played a big role.
Yes.
In my area like Lango, I think it is the only area where people line up for money openly, in total disregard of the law. You can take a video recording, you do it, nobody cares. So what would you expect? And parallel, imagine you are to address 50 rallies in your campaign. Everybody lines up, minimally 2,000 shillings. Minimum, others go to 5. So you find that an articulate, a competent MP wouldn't even go to be nominated. I mean, you would. I know people who are competent who have gone to stand and they said, come back next time. Because you can't address a rally and people line up for money. Some places, somebody address a rally and then he gives this representative. You get this, you let them take soda. But where you have reached, where people line up and you give, what kind of election? What will you bring as an MP? Money. The other thing is education, of course. I'm surprised he's saying this, that the data shows a very educated parliament. But from an area that I know of, I can point to you person by person. This one has equivalent, that one has equivalent, this one has equivalent. So I don't know how you analyze this. I'll do that. I will see it. But I'm surprised that your data is so good, and yet the region that I know is so bad. So education also matters. Timing. And I will take time with terms of the size of parliament.
Yes.
It's so big that even us here in this debate, if you gave us only one minute, even what we have in our mind or in our stomach, you can't develop a point.
Yes.
You can't develop a point. So this big size vis-a-vis time allotted has affected the quality of debate. Many people think that we should actually reduce it to a district representation. So,
and on that, many people think, of course, everyone sees the construction behind Parliament. So that in itself still wouldn't remedy the issue that people can't speak, even when there's a bigger Parliament that is being constructed.
I think the
Doesn't
issue
stop.
is not
The
the
size.
structure.
Doesn't
the
stop.
issue is not the size, the issue is the numbers.
Yes, they were throwing that, you know,
They
we
say
are
the
building
parliament
this
is
bigger-
small.
Yes.
Parliament will still continue to sit from 2 to 6
You
years.
see, making that it is the size of the parliament is like a joke that was made about a senior citizen in the name of General Moses Ali. The Monitor newspaper published that President Museveni was going to reduce the size of cabinet. And then the Lizard said, that cabinet will still be big as long as Moses Ali is there. So is it the physical size in cabinet? So if you say they're going to build a big parliament and people will have more time, the size of the house will not increase the size. So the size is big to the extent that some people feel it should be a district representation. This affects the quality. And then also now, attendance. There's some members who actually don't attend. Even big as it is, sometimes they fail to raise a quorum. You see? Now, meaning that even someone who cannot attend frequently cannot even follow the flow of debate. So all this attendance and all this manifest into poor quality of debate. Now, when I was young, my uncle was a court clerk, and courts were supplied with answered of the parliament debate, because it is expected that as lawyers, both on the bench and in the bar, you are expected to know the genesis of a particular law. So parliamentary answers were supplied to all courts in the villages. So I would read them, and it is actually what shaped my interest into debate. You could see the quality of debate, including the humor. It was so good the days of Obuangor and the rest, leave alone 6 parliament. So if you compare the other answer than now, you really see that quality has deteriorated. Now, I come to your issue of the impeachment. Impeachment, for those of us who believed in the movement, we warned our colleagues that under NRM, ministers were censored because we are all the same family. But now the polarization of multi-party, even if a minister walked naked from City Square to Parliament, we just say he was bewitched by the opposition and we will refute.
Major, what a party is doing too, because he has said the most that Parliament does is, first of all, expect that you're educated to some level and then orient. What is your party doing to make sure that its members of Parliament are better?
I thought that was a standalone question that I was coming to.
Yes.
Now, you had asked me, the party with its majority and the longevity, if we are okay with whatever has transpired. Of course, we also recruit from the population.
Yes.
And all these money aspects also affect us. So the quality also is equally affected in the party. We can't say we have a superb members of Parliament. Our recruitment is also from the community.
So it's a reflection of
it is a reflection. So we similarly suffer.
Yes.
We do try to regulate because we have the toughest primary election. Our primary election is like a general election. Our primary election is like general. So we would expect ideally to come with the most competent, but we are still affected. So we have used our majority. In that, we have tried to use our majority to make policy sail through. Because we design policy in manifestos to the best interest of the country, and we think that the role legislature plays would help us. And indeed, we have done it. Of course, over time, President Museveni has quarreled with Parliament. Remember the Parliament that stopped Bujagale. Up to now, he has not recovered from it. So we also get challenges. Sometimes you have your majority who actually don't hear the whip. Ideally, we have a chief whip who is supposed to whip our members into listening to us. But sometimes whipping them has become difficult that you don't achieve. So we have used the majority to make our policy sail through that we have designed in manifestos and which we think would achieve. But in quality, we are not isolated either, because we also recruit from the community. The money issue is affected, and also the education matter is affected, because many people have actually tended to put up their education. There's equalization in higher education, and there's equalization at UNEB. I mean, UNEB verifies, and there's the issue of equivalent. People tend to equate equivalent, which is not equivalent, but becomes equivalent. Others are challenged in court, and courts allow it, that it is okay. So we also pick from the public. But all in all, with all these factors, we are really saying the quality of debate needs to be
yes.
And a lot should be done to raise it.
Thank you very much. And as we move towards the end, I would like to bring something up with you. I was hoping there would be a lady, but we believe the facts stay the same. In terms of course, this regime, or the mix that the legal mix that brings up Parliament is keen on special interest groups, starting with the youth, labor, but most especially women. And I believe NRM is celebrated, at least this regime is celebrated on the one side as a success story in terms of women empowerment. But do you think this has reflected in terms of the aspirations of those who designed it?
I mean, yeah. So the question of gender disparity has been an issue, and it's a global issue.
And yesterday it was one of the key. We saw the theme coming up again with Honorable Juliet saying that if you attack one woman, you've attacked all of us. So. Yeah.
So of course the issue of yesterday, I think it was uncalled for in the first place.
I really beg to be educated on what happened yesterday.
So yesterday during
the
plenary session, which was chaired by Honorable Ayivu, the Right Honorable, the Honorable Chinyamatama Juliet raises an issue of Honorable Zake, who went to our constituency and made very derogatory statements that she said she could not actually utter them on the floor of Parliament. So, and she actually called for the Speaker to take action against the member. Of course, as a result of that, the it seemed to have been a preconceived idea that the female MPs, especially from those the ruling party, would coalesce on this idea or to find a way of pushing that specific idea. And so there was a bit of a scuffle between the women member of parliament from the NRM side, and they wanted to push Zaki out of the house. And so there was a bit of scuffle, for which the speaker suspended the
Physical stuff?
Yes, there was a physical scuffle. Actually, that's what caused the deputy speaker to suspend the house.
Yeah.
But I think
in general.
In general, the thing is that in principle, matters that happen out of parliament, ideally, these are matters that now are supposed to be
Handled at that level.
Yeah, the law provides for that. So they should, the courts.
General Kahinda Utafire asked an opposition member to repeat outside parliament.
Exactly.
That's
the honorable Nanda.
Yeah, so the matters that happen out of parliament should be handled by the courts of law and other alternative avenues which are provided within the law to address those matters. But matters within the house, we of course have a disciplinary committee. We have a committee in charge of rules, privileges, and discipline that should be able to handle that. But you know that there are matters now such as that, which they happen from outside the parliament, but they have the ability to affect how parliament operates.
Yes.
And so that's where the leadership, and that's in an informal structure, where the leadership of parliament comes in play, where the leadership could potentially call the two members and try to intervene to see what could be the issue.
Yeah.
But the practice of matters that happening out of parliament, finding the space within the flow of parliament, actually, at least from my following, I started seeing this towards the 10th parliament, actually the 9th parliament, the 10th parliament, and now the 11th parliament, where in the 10th parliament you could see the differences between the then speaker, Right Honorable Aditwala Kadaga, and Persis Namuganza, as a result of scuffle, something that happened in the constituency, and then the matter finds itself on the floor, and one is sent to the committee, and so it's a messy thing. And so I think Parliament has to come out very, very firm in terms of handling some of these differences, because first of all, it affects how Parliament operates its business. Parliament ends up measuring on minors,
and the public is obviously watching.
Exactly, and public is watching, and that affects also the.
But as time runs out, I think the question around the special interest groups and whether that has achieved the aspirations of the framers in terms of representation of women. Largely, that's the biggest group, but of course, there's also youth, labor, and these other.
Absolutely,
including the army.
Yeah, so I think by and large, to the extent that they were established, ideally the thinking was that they would have a better understanding of the people they represent, including the women. Of course, the women MPs find themselves in a peculiar state where it's not only the women who elects them for those positions, but it's a general public. Yet they represent the views, they're expected to represent the views of the women. But I think it also questions, it goes back to the question of the numbers, the bloated parliament, which has increased. And if you look at the quality, it cuts across. We've actually had some of the concerns at Parliament, where women MPs are either shy shy to face the cameras, or even some make very firm positions, and you can see that there is an effort towards ensuring that the question of affirmative action is strengthened, but it's still the male domineering nature is still prevailing. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. I think our time is almost fast spent, but I would like to give I'd like to start with you, maybe in a minute or two, just to give some parting remarks, especially regarding the Parliament and the discussion that we're having today.
Yeah, I mean, for me, first would be to call on Parliament to first of all make a position and be very firm in terms of its decision, because they hold a very key role in terms of how the democracy is strengthened in our country, and so they should play up to the expectations of the constitution, of the expectation of the framers of the constitution. Two is to mind the other is to the public. I think is to ensure that we continuously understand what the roles of these MPs look like, so that we can hold them accountable. And their roles
Do you
largely.
think the public is holding them accountable for the wrong?
Absolutely, and due to a number of reasons, including by themselves. You have members of parliament coming to parliament as a result of very wrong promises that they give to their constituents, which are outside their mandate. And so you have the public demanding for different they have a certain expectation of some of these members, yet they cannot deliver. Their roles are largely on to oversight, legislation, representation, and budgeting. And so progressively towards ensuring that the public understands but also you see the other thing, just maybe to as I conclude, the politics and the dynamics at parliament also has a key role in how performance of parliament. You have, for example, a member of parliament has 5 years. So, and with the high attrition of parliament, you have close to 80% or thereabout not coming back. So if they have 5 years, the first year, meaning most of them are fresh. So you have the first year, they're trying to catch up, they're trying to understand these are rules, they're trying to understand this is whichever room is being parliament, they're trying to catch up. Second year, it's still also a catch up. By the third year, when now they are a bit stable, elections are nearing. So they go back. So they get affected in terms of also the question of even the dynamics of how to raise a matter of national importance. Going through the 2 minutes, the 2 minutes time which they are given on the floor, and all those dynamics. There is a lot as far as the politics within catching the eye of the speaker and those other things. But I think ultimately is to call on the public to understand the roles of these members of parliament, so that we can hold them accountable and demand for better.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chemonges-Timothy, fiercely policy analyst, and always your insights, factual and insightful. Honorable, your parting remarks to MPs, but also to Ugandans.
I think we have reached a point where we really need to evaluate whether we need the kind of parliament that we have at the moment, in terms of size and also in terms of qualification. Yes, the current qualifications were determined by the 1995 Constitution, and they have never been changed. But we have changed so many articles in that Constitution, which are actually very, very fundamental. So I think it's time for us to look into that direction, whether it's not time for us to raise the bar to maybe a bachelor's degree as minimum qualification, because at least
without equivalence,
somebody who has gone to university is exposed to some level of display of, or understanding of governance system. Two, the workings, a member of parliament is a very distinguished person. Is presumed to be a distinguished person, and a leader for that matter. So our conduct as members of parliament, I think the moment you're elected as a member of parliament, we expect some changes in you as an individual. And what we saw yesterday and what we saw happening in Rakai, which of course eventually was brought now on the floor of parliament, depicts the kind of individuals we have elected into that house. Honorable Zake is not a first-time member of parliament.
As we conclude,
this was his second term. Honorable Chinyamatama was with her in the 10th parliament, and both of them are there for their second term. You would expect that their conduct would be different. First of all, it is our code of conduct that when you are going to a fellow's constituency, you notify that member that I'll be in the Honorable General Awich
our time is
constituency, and therefore
our time is running out.
Yeah. So those are some of the basics really we expect to be at play or to display when we are conducting ourselves as members of parliament or as an institution of parliament, so that we offer hope to the people that we represent. I thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Atiku, Bernard, and we hope you keep joining us here to dissect some of those issues around Parliament, especially that you were there for 2 whole terms, which is, of course,
And we'll be coming back.
commendable. And we'll be coming back.
Mm.
And, of course, Major Pollar, which I understand you want to say a few things, but also
Just,
parting
it
remarks.
is parting shots, surely, that at 61, I called on members of parliament or whoever will be elected to mind that we must be independent, because this topic is in relation to independence. Please stand firm. As legislature, you are representing the people. Say what the people want. Let the colonizers leave us alone in the laws and the policies that we make.
Thank you very much, retired Major Pollar Awich. And thank you all, my dear panelists, for the discussion today. It has been an interesting discussion, of course, one of my learnings being that which Major Pollar Awich concluded with, that actually even within Parliament, the elements of imperialism that are very direct and, of course, affect us, because these are laws, as Honorable said, that take really long to change. To our dear viewers, I hope it has been as insightful for you as it was for me. And, of course, we wish you a happy 61st birthday as Ugandans. And we hope that next year we shall be celebrating achievements, more than just the number, of course. And thank you for tuning in. Please make sure you comment, share, and move the conversation as far as possible as we continue to work together to a Uganda that works for every one of us. Thank you. Till next time.